While the S2000 has proven to be a pretty good and capable track car, there are a couple improvements I wanted to make. I'm gonna actually include a couple pictures of some on-track stuff, and you can see there's a ton of body roll, and basically to the point where the car is resting on the bump stops around corners, and it was actually more apparent when I installed a stickier like 200 tread wear tire, and it was even more dramatic of an issue when I decided to raise the car a little bit, because essentially the car was low enough to the point where the geometry of it going around the corner, it would just rest on the bump stop around the entire corner, and it would have an effect of a really high spring rate and feel pretty good, but it wasn't actually doing anything suspension wise because it was bottomed out. And after raising the car up, now it's even more sketchy and apparent, because pretty much right before the apex or into the apex, the car will be on its normal spring and mid-corner hit that bump stop and all of a sudden get really stiff. And then as you're easing out of the corner, back on the spring again. So this really weird feeling. So I was running the Rockstar Garage Spec Fuel 441 coilovers, and the previous owner actually put these on with the softest spring setup. So this is more set up for like street use. So I believe it's a 12K front spring and a 10K rear. So we're actually going up to a 14K in the front and then swapping the 12Ks to the rear. So that's more of a aggressive like track oriented setup. And then even higher than that, people actually go up to like 16Ks, but that's for a dedicated track car that's pretty much just track only. And obviously you guys know that I do quite a bit of canyon driving with this. So another thing we have is a set of E-Box sway bars. This car has stock sway bars on it right now. I was doing some reading and they said the E-Box rear sway bar might be a little bit too much. So we might just run the front stiffer bar and then the stock rear bar. If that's not enough, we might just go to the E-Box in the rear at the lowest setting. But I don't want this car to be a little unruly and oversteer happy, adding too much bar in the rear, so that can happen. The other thing is the brake pads are not the best, so I was running the Stop Tech Sports or something like that. And what would happen middle of a track session, especially on hotter day, the brakes would just, the pad almost felt like it was melting and you would have no brake pedal. The fluid definitely wasn't boiling because I run the Motul 650 and I'm actually putting Motul RBS 700 in it now. So I don't think the fluid was boiling. I think it was just the pad. So we upgraded to the Hawk pads, the track day pads. We're gonna try those. And then I also do have braided brake lines. We're gonna try to do as much as we can today and see how far we get. I got the brakes off because I'm doing the pads and rotors. I got the brake line off there too. I'm actually just trying to change these springs out just by taking this lower out and then this spindle and then just rotating this looser and then just dropping the spring out through the bottom and then reconnecting it. I mean, I guess I could undo those bolts too, but this is probably the best for path of least resistance. I had to take my splitter off, and this is of course the underside, pretty nasty, but it's held up pretty well except for me running into my jack pulling into the garage. So I'm gonna try to flatten that out hopefully, but yeah, this thin Alumilite actually holds up. And then I'm just comparing the old sway bar to the new one. The old one is 26 millimeter thickness and the new E-Bach is 32 mil. And it looks like the ends are quite a bit longer, so you get more leverage. And then there's two positions for stiffness. Obviously the inner one is going to be stiffer. They said just to run the inner one straight away, so I'm going to do that. And then, so I got the old springs out. This is the 12K front. These are actually going to go in the rear now. And then the rear 10s are coming out. Got the 14s in the front, looking pretty good. But yeah, I had to kind of lower this little skid plate down because that's where the sway bar goes, and I could drop that out through, fortunately. So a little bit more work than I thought, but yeah, just pretty bare bones suspension right now. Everything's torn apart because I'm also doing the brakes. So all this stuff is sitting there. Looks like the previous owner had some weird caliper paint on this. I tried to get most of this with a wire brush while it was still on the car, but while this is off, I'm most likely going to clean up the rest of it and just go down back to bare metal. Maybe I'll paint them someday, but I really do want to upgrade the brakes on this car next. Just a little update here. Really not liking this whole spring situation in the rear. So the previous spring was a bit shorter and it allowed me to run the bottom of this up a little bit higher and actually run the lock ring. Well, the longer spring and getting the same height out of the car, I have to basically delete one of the lock rings on here. I mean, I think it's fine because it's all jammed together as much as I could, but yeah, gonna have to eventually get a shorter spring for this because these are really meant for the fronts. And then I did end up putting the new sway bar in. This is actually only 2 mil thicker than the AP1 rear sway bar, so I should be fine hopefully. And then I'm going to be running it at the softest setting, so should be good there. And then we got this brake line installed, got new pads in the rear, so looking pretty good. It was kind of a nightmare to try to get the sway bar in place with my HKS dual exhaust because there's just so much going on. You had to like sneak it through that little hole, so that was interesting. And then got the front all done, so new rotors, pads, the front sway bar is in, the heavier springs, and then the new brake line. So just got to put the rear together and then bleed all the brakes. All right, I just want to go for a quick test drive here, just to see how everything feels and make sure everything's tight and feeling the way it's supposed to. I actually don't notice too much of a difference right off the bat with the higher spring rate, but I think after a little bit of driving I will. Definitely over the little creases and bumps, it definitely feels like a little more solid. But let's check the body roll. Oh wow, that is actually a massive improvement. I drive this car quite a bit, so I'm pretty sensitive to changes at this point. But yeah, that's the transition and everything feels really good so far. There's way more balance than it did with all that body roll. So the coilovers are kind of set in the middle position as far as dampening goes. I think it's like 15 clicks out of 32, but yeah, it feels pretty good so far. And those rear longer springs don't really seem to be an issue. So the ride height is right where it should be, and yeah. But tonight I'm actually gonna take it to the canyons. I'm probably not gonna film because it's nearly impossible to film at night, which kind of sucks. But yeah, it feels really good so far. You could always tell on the massive dips in the rear that it was just like hitting the bump stops. Like if you hit like a big whoop in the road, you can definitely tell that it was just straight up impacting the and bottoming out shock. So a little bit more spring rate should help considerably, especially that I have aero and everything. So definitely do need to bleed the brakes a little bit better. The brakes are very, very squishy. Yeah, not overly bouncy. I was worried that these coilovers weren't gonna, or the actual shocks weren't gonna handle the higher spring rate, but I did talk to Rockstar Garage and they said as long as you're only going up 2K, you don't have to revalve the shocks. So they feel pretty good. They feel like dampened the way they should be. So excited to take this car to the track after all of these changes, especially the sway bars. I think they're going to make a big difference. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.